Hey everyone, welcome back to the Layback Podcast. Joining us today is Ezra Bye. Ezra Bye, I'm going to hope I get the Wake Forest title correctly because it's super long and he probably deals with this all the time, but I'm pretty sure it's Director of Player Development and Pitching Lab Coordinator. And I hope I even said those in the right order. I don't know if the order matters between Pitching Lab and Director of Player Development, but yes, Ezra is a new member of the Wake Forest staff. He's been there for, it's unbelievable to say, a semester already at this point. But he came in with Coach Eric Neeson as the pitching coach at Wake as Muscara and Fish moved on to Duke. But these guys have done great stuff in the fall. It's been awesome to work with them yet again. Even with the new staff, we feel like we're still a part of the family, which has been excellent. And of course, on the horizon, we have the Wake Forest Player Development Seminar. We'll talk about that a little bit down the line as we're super excited to be a part of it again with Flex Pro. But in the meantime, we are going to dive into Ezra's bio and really what has gotten him to this position because he has a history. I know I said I wasn't going to do this, Ezra, but I apologize. He has a history in pro ball with a few different orgs. I'll save the orgs and let you handle those, but a few different orgs, and he was a D2 player himself. And as everyone knows who is an avid listener of the Layback Podcast, we believe that the best minds in baseball come from D2. So with that, Ezra, I'm going to dish it off to you. Thanks for joining us today and looking forward to this chat.
Well, I appreciate it, Adam, and thank you for having me on. This is awesome. You did get the title correct. I don't know the order of it. You might have gotten it correct. To be honest, the director part was a bit of a surprise for me coming in, but it's been awesome being back with Eric Neeson and Coach Walter here, and the staff is pretty amazing. But yeah, I did play D2 Chestnut Hill College. If you've heard of that, you're probably one of the few people in the world who have. I actually quit my last semester, so I didn't play my last year of spring ball. I had a really kind of unique situation in terms of credits where I only needed one more semester to graduate, but wanted to play in the spring. So I actually took that fall and went and trained at Driveline out in Seattle, made the trip out myself. I was terrible. I was hurt. I wasn't like a good D2 athlete. The story I like to tell people, like I knew my career was pretty much over when, the radar boards right up top on the plyo walls there, Driveline. This was their previous facility, not their new one that they're in now, by the way, too. And one of the employees, Stephen Hart, was actually vacuuming as I was throwing plyos, and the vacuum was registering on the radar as higher velocities than my plyo throws. And I just kind of sat there. I was hurt. I was like, okay, this vacuum is throwing balls harder than me right now. Maybe the playing career is not going to ultimately work out. So I actually went back Chestnut Hill College that spring, ended up leaving the team, but where we trained in the winter was actually a training facility called Baseball PDS, Player Development Systems. Ches Angeloni, Dan Williams, great people. So I just kind of cold emailed them like, hey, I'm like interested in the training side of things. Are you guys looking for an intern? And they emailed back saying like, yeah, actually we are. We're looking for a performance intern. So kind of got my foot in the door with them. It was great. I was kind of like performance intern, so more in the weight room, but then would watch some of the pitching stuff, help them a little bit with that, and then watch what they did with the hitters. I did that the rest of my college career, kind of finished with a degree in psychology from Chestnut Hill. Needed to move back home. I was driving back and forth from New Jersey every day in the summer to go work at Baseball PDS. So it was just a bit of a long days. Ended up emailing Eugene Bleeker, was looking for a couple pitching coaches at the time, or he was looking for one pitching coach at the time. Emailed him, didn't think anything of it. Like 2 weeks later, me and George Zirkle are driving cross country, both being hired by Bleak to get out there. So spent about 6 months out there. I mean, 108 performance, the amount of like stuff that you just learned there was insane. You worked your butt off. It was like my introduction into really like diving into the biomechanics of pitching and all that good stuff with Bleak. Ended up coming back home to another facility outside the Philly area called Maple Zone Sports Institute. It's now Ascent, where I got the pitching coordinator job. Was actually living in a tiny home in someone's backyard while doing that. It was a heck of an experience. The bed was like in the top of the little house. You couldn't like sit up in bed, otherwise you would hit your head on the roof of the little thing. Oh, it was great. Great time in my life. Definitely some gritty days. But it was like my first experience really like running a program there. And we had a good handful of pro guys in, so it was a great experience. And then that was like winter of 2018 going into 2019. I ended up applying and getting a job with the Houston Astros. So my first year in pro ball was in Florida as the pitching apprentice, basically the GCL at the time, still called the Gulf Complex League or the Gulf Coast League, I think it was. But I was like the bullpen coach there, helped with rehab, all different kind of things. And that was my first like introduction into the rehab world of baseball. And it was pretty interesting to me. The rehab guy at the time, Todd Naskadov, is with the Reds now. He was also my roommate, in addition to like my mentor at the complex. And it seemed like interesting what he was doing. So 2020 happens, you know, the COVID year. 2021, I actually go down to the DSL for the Astros. Spent the entire year, lived at the complex because I did not want to drive back and forth. If you've been down to the DR in pro ball, you know what I'm talking about. Those roads are a little hectic at times. So I tried to stay off them as much as possible. So I literally lived in one of the dorm rooms at the complex. It was fantastic. Great experience just getting to be down there for a full season. And then 2022, the Astros rehab job opened up and I was super interested in it. Nowadays, we're getting to the point where most people, most coaches have like a pretty good idea of being able to kind of cross different boundaries into different silos or different departments, I should say. But back then, it was a little bit more siloed. So it was like all encompassing and super interesting for me, especially coming from the performance side of things. Like I have my CSCS, that stuff is still very interesting to me. And that's where I really worked a lot more with Chris Martin, the LSU strength and conditioning coach, of course, now. And it was a lot of like, hey, we should be able to do this better. Why are the programs kind of based on this slightly archaic programming? There's not much like sense necessarily when you look at some of the detail. When you look at these distances, the only one that has like true meaning behind it is 60 feet. And so Chris and I are kind of having these discussions throughout the year of like, okay, how can we do this better? How can we objectify the rehab process more, right? Not necessarily like speed things up or down necessarily, right? I know that's a huge concern in the rehab world of like trying to move too fast. But how can we hit these markers in a slightly different way that are a bit more meaningful rather than just using these distance markers? And so we started a little bit of that year with Houston. I ended up leaving the Astros that year, took the rehab pitching coordinator job with the Los Angeles Dodgers, where it was very much people asking the same questions that me and Chris had at that time, the year before. And okay, how can we do things better? And I give a lot of credit to Rob Hill and Brandon McDaniel, who's up there on the big league staff, sort of sitting in between medical performance and the pitching side of things too. It was a lot of openness and willingness to like hear these things, hear these thoughts. And so it was really cool. For 2 years, we ran our rehab throwing completely velocity based, right? There was no distances prescribed. It was all weighted balls. We were literally hand recording velocities. So it was me, the PTs, the ATs, our pitching intern, the medical intern. I mean, I have a file of 60,000 throws that we collected over those 2 years of literally just the guy makes a throw, the velo pops up on the radar, and we sit there, write it, transfer it to a CSV, an Excel file, and then I code a little bit and would send out like this kind of weekly report on the guys. But it was a really cool like experience to see. One, we kind of just came up with this new program, right? Like it's something that we felt hadn't been done before, explicitly being done by velocity and removing all limitations of distance and whatnot. And getting to see those guys who went through it the first year in their 24 seasons was awesome. We had guys who had like career best FIP and XFIP and ERA and K percentage and walk percentage. We had 7 career best velocity PRs. 5 guys had like their average velocity was the highest of their lives in 24. And so it was really cool to see, hey, this thing works a little bit, right? It's not the be all end all, but there might be something to this. After those 2 years, it was a really awesome experience. I love a lot of the people with LA. I think it was just time for me to kind of remove myself from the rehab setting a little bit, specifically or solely the rehab setting, because it just wears on you. It's a hard place to be in. I had two shoulder surgeries myself, so that was a big piece of like wanting to be in that space. But if you've spent time there, it can just be a tough environment. And so ended up leaving the Dodgers, got a job with the Cleveland Guardians, a little bit more front office based, where I was basically like helping the pitching group, helped the pitching leadership a little bit, but my focus was mostly the high A and the double A pitchers, kind of communicating with those pitching coaches, player plans, tracking them in season, all that good stuff. And then I was watching closely the saga of college coaches moving around over the summer, and I'm in the office one day. Actually, funny enough, one of the interns on my floor with Cleveland was a Wake Forest student analyst on the team here. And so we were talking one Monday morning, and he comes up to me. His name's Zach. He says, "Hey, I think like the whispers through the trees is that Eric Neeson is going to be the next pitching coach." And I look down at my phone and I see a text from Eric, "Hey, call me when you can." And I'm like, "Okay, all right, we might be doing this." It took like a week of talking with Eric and trying to figure it out. It was a hard decision. I won't lie. The people in Cleveland are amazing, amazing people. But for me, it just felt like getting back towards being on the field was a big piece for me. And of course, having worked with Eric in 21 and 22 with the Astros made it just a pretty seamless transition to get back here. So it was sorry, that was a long-winded way of getting here, but yeah, it's been a blast so far, and it's crazy to hear you say that a semester's done already. You got here in July, and it was a really cool experience. Like probably my first real like high level D1 college experience. So it was a fun time kind of learning the ins and outs of the college game again.
I feel like we're now at a choose your own adventure point. We were going so far into that story and I loved every second of it. But I realized I think when you got to the point where you mentioned doing rehab programs with Chris Martin, where I thought to myself, I should probably write some of this down on the side so I don't just neglect everything that you shared and hang to one point. Now, I hate doing this to just address the single most recent thing you said, and I truly mean the most recent thing you said. How cool is it to feel like a D1 athlete?
It's great. I mean, again, like we talked about us being D2 boys. So there's a certain level of pride, and there's JUCO pride when you've gone through that route.
Yep.
There's a level of like, oh man, this is what a D1 locker room looks like. This is what a D1 like player lounge looks like. This is what like a pitching lab actually looks like. Yeah, it's definitely took me a couple of weeks of like geeking out and being like, oh shoot, this is the life. This is really cool. Like
Right.
I wish I could have done this when I was a player.
Yeah, look at what you're wearing right now. Give a quick look around the room. I
Oh,
mean, you're at the stadium.
yeah. Oh yeah, I'm literally overlooking our field right now. I'm in our diamond suite for our alumni, and yeah, it's an awesome atmosphere. It's an amazing environment. Everything they've built here so far is I mean, it's great to be a part of.
I know this isn't the nuts and bolts of the podcast, but that's how I felt when I did my grad year at University of Dayton. I went from Eckerd up to University of Dayton. It's not like Dayton is the bee's knees when it comes to anything, but like I showed up and literally on day one, they gave me three dry fits and two pairs of shorts. And I was like, I get to keep these? Are you serious? Like, you're telling me I get gear in the fall? I don't have to earn my gear in the spring. I get it in the fall. This is amazing. So I 100% fully understand. And then to find out that like there was someone that did my team laundry, like I went and dropped it off at the equipment room. Was like, this is amazing. I don't these guys are all taking this for granted. But no, that's why the best minds come from D2 and come from JUCO and come from those places because you have to figure it out on your own.
Well, it's funny you say that because my first spring training with the Astros, I got there a couple weeks before like everyone got down there to try and settle in a little bit. And Todd Naskadov again with the Reds, like one of the first things he did was like take me around, and he was like, "Hey, do you know how to use a laundry loop?" And I was like, "I have no idea. That's not a thing for D2 for my school. Like I have
What's
no idea.
that?
I did my own laundry. I don't know what you're talking about." So he literally had to like run me through. Here's where you put the socks. Here's it was great.
Yep, that was. That was probably the most valuable thing I learned at Dayton. And then I felt really cool when I was at the complex with the Padres for a while and I got my loop there again. I was like, oh yeah, I'm a big deal. I feel like a really big deal because I have a laundry loop. It's
Yeah,
like Borat when he gets his chair. King of the castle, baby.
yeah.
But
It's something that has your name on it. It's great.
yeah, for real. And it's amazing how much pride I took in that laundry loop. But now we can get into the important stuff. Like I said, I feel bad spending so much time on that, but I always find those discussions hilarious and illuminating for that matter. You mentioned getting the CSCS. When did you get that in the process? Was that right when you decided to quit college, basically? And I know that's phrased poorly because you graduated. Quit the team, pursue training. Is that when you got the CSCS, or where did that mix into the process?
Yeah, so I when I quit the team, um,
I
and
like my
started
phrasing more personally,
it,
but
and I started in the baseball PDS in that facility. Actually, I purchased the NSCA textbook
yep.
and just like started diving in because I there were just like hours of my day where it was like, hey, I have nothing to do. What can I try and figure out? And so I started it that spring when I don't know if it still works this way, but the way you had to take the test was you had to sign up and then you had a 60-day window to choose your date to get it done. And so I was kind of struggling, like after leaving baseball PDS, going back home, kind of struggling of what I was going to do next. This was before I kind of got with Eugene Bleecker and all that good stuff. And I was kind of like, all right, I just need to do this thing. I just need to like sign up, force myself to do the 60-day window and take it. So I ended up taking it finally in the summer of 2018 is when I finally like pulled the trigger and passed. And I passed by like four questions on each section. It was pretty close, but I was so thankful. I don't need to ever take that test again. It's very like when you get that textbook and then taking that test, it's very much like they want direct answers from that textbook. There are plenty of questions where, especially if you've had a couple years of experience, you'd be like, I don't think I would answer the question like that. But they're very particular in how they look for things. So just thankful that that part is done. But yeah, that was pretty early on in the process.
I can corroborate everything you're saying because I think I took mine. It might have been the first week of February of 2018. I don't remember the exact date, but I was super close to yours. And there were a couple sections because I had the old book and then they had just come out with like a new edition in 2017, I think, or maybe it was 2016. But I had the book from like 2014. I was like, there's 0% chance I'm getting a new one. And they added like a tactical training piece to it and or whatever CrossFit was called before CrossFit became big, or there was like a cross training section, and you had to learn about like rope programming. It was like, what? Why? Like, This is so unimportant. And then how far to put your squat racks from the wall, and how high electrical sockets need to be, and how is this going to help me help a guy throw 96 and then do it on repeat? Like, this is so far from what we're actually chasing down. So no, I totally get what you're saying. But now taking that CSCS, I know you said you were originally kind of on the strength side when you were at PDS. And then when you moved on to 108, that's obviously bucking the system a good bit from what we would see in an NSCA textbook. What's being done under the walls and roof of Bleecker. Very different, might I add. Not just slightly different, very different. So what was it like? Was the CSCS literally just checking a box so you had the initials after your name and people saw you as something a little bit more? And then maybe how did you apply, or I guess not apply anything when you made the move to Bleeker's place?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of checking the box. I was probably at a point in my life where I was a little bit unsure of do I want to go back the skill side of things and be, a pitching coach, or do I want to kind of continue down in the strength and conditioning world? And I really enjoy being in a weight room. I enjoy kind of like seeing processes unfold in there, but I at the end of the day, I hate like programming, like sitting down. I've done that at one point in my life, like again early on, And just sitting down every Sunday and like cranking out strength and conditioning programs was not it for me. And so when I was actually talking with Bleeker about the position, I was probably leaning a little bit more in my head of the S&C world still. And he was like, well, look, we have two S&C guys. They're both like former Cressy interns. I'm not hiring an S&C turn. I'm hiring a pitching guy. Like, do you want it? You have a pitching background, it sounds like. Do you want to continue down that road? And so that was kind of when the decision was made for me of like, okay, like I'll kind of keep this in my back pocket. I still think it's really important, but I'm going to kind of head down this pitching route. I think what it does, like you said, it checks a box, but also you put those letters behind your name and it just makes people understand that you went through the process. Like again, having those letters next to my name doesn't mean I can program for our guys or I will program for our guys or that I'm the smartest S&C guy, right? It's about like, okay, making sure that the S&C people I do work with have an understanding that I can at least communicate and live in their world a little bit. And I think that's the biggest point is just making sure they understand like, hey, your piece is valuable. That's why I went down this road. It's to try and learn some of your terminology so that when I have these conversations about our players with you, I'm not a complete idiot or hopefully not sounding like a complete idiot for the most part. Yeah, it was more of like once I made that decision, it's like, okay, I don't really want to kind of continue down super deep of like the programming world of S&C, but I think a lot of obviously just the concepts of basic human movement are super important and applicable to pitching. And so it was just really good for me to be able to live in that world and have those in-depth conversations with those S&C people at the time, and then ultimately people like Chris Martin or like Mark Seaver here with Wake Forest. It just makes things a lot more seamless to be able to be on the same level with some of those communications.
Right. You flash forward then to what you were doing with the Astros, for example, and your title is pitching apprentice, or you go down to the DSL in your second year, I guess technically third, but second year actually physically
Yeah.
somewhere with the team. Being able to wear multiple hats at the lower levels of pro ball is almost like having Superman's cape, I feel like, because people are so in the weeds on their one specific topic that you get caught in the silos. I know you mentioned it earlier in your kind of like bio introduction piece, but especially in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, to think that we would actually have people in a pro organization that can flutter between strength and pitching performance and rehab, those things didn't cross over at all. It was literally three different sectors that all operated independently. So I'm sure you felt like you had this sort of like edge or ace in the hole in a sense that you could speak the strength and conditioning language. And then your background of going through a couple rehabs yourself or training at Driveline or working at these different facilities, you probably saw like, wait, there's also this massive disconnect as we're trying to get guys back from rehab into performance again, which led to ultimately what you did with Chris Martin, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that's also why I really enjoyed being at the complex in pro ball in Florida, I should say. The DR again was great, but the complex in Florida is like the genesis of everything, right? It's where, depending on the org, it's where a lot of coordinators and directors will live. It's certainly where most of them pass through several times over the year after spring training, of course. It's just like, I don't know if it gave me an edge as much as it was the right environment then for me to like pick and choose and really try and take advantage of all the people I had around me. I think that was the biggest thing for me. It was just like really trying to understand all these different pieces are important. We can get a guy throwing harder by changing his mechanics, but at the end of the day, if he's not eating right with the nutrition or the dietitians, if he's not like lifting or the mobility is not dialed in or the force plate jumps, whatever metric is important to you in those areas, or he's not recovering or doing the arm care, again, same thing, or he's not doing his flex pro with the medical staff. It's so easy to see in pro ball in that environment at the complex how important all these different things are to getting these guys better. I've been around some pretty elite athletes, And I think as an industry, we talk about, a lot of these elite athletes can probably outplay some of these areas. And it's true. I fully believe that. But to me, it's like, okay, how much better could you be then if we did actually dial in some of these areas? Is there something missing? To me, it's just like, what are we missing to help the player in front of us? That's at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. If it's not my pitching programming that's going to get a guy to throw harder, if it has to be the S&C because that's what the guy needs, then like, okay, let's dive in and really truly try to like understand that side of things. So I think it really just comes back to like what does the player in front of us need? And then because of how many different areas just go into that, it just makes sense to try and be as communicative as possible. I'm never going to be like a PT who's going to run the first couple weeks post TJ. I'm never going to have that kind of knowledge base, and nor do I need or want to. But being able to be in that room while they're doing some of that early stage rehab and just like soaking it up and talking with the trainer on the table is invaluable to me.
Now let's flash forward to your current situation. You bring up how valuable it is to have everybody in one place. Fortunately, in the college setting, literally everyone is under one roof, or worst case scenario, they're within a mile of one another, as opposed to in pro ball, people are all over the country, if not the world. So, what are, I guess, things that you are no longer taking for granted that you finally have everybody all in one place? I'm sure it feels a bit like the complex again, where you're doing morning meetings and you're going over, like, this is what we saw on the rehab side, this is what we saw in the weight room yesterday, or this is what this guy's cleared to do. But now that you have Seaver, you have Strom, you have Salento on the offensive side, you have so many people that are at your disposal to check in with. What has come to light for you from that? Like, are there things that, as I mentioned earlier, maybe you took for granted in the past, or you didn't fully appreciate because you just didn't have everyone together?
Yeah, I think, going from the pro org side of things, where, like you mentioned, not only are you dealing with a lot more people, but you're dealing with people all over the country or the world that you're trying to like get a hold of and get a plan together with. I think just having everyone in one place, it just makes a world of difference. I don't need to call someone who's in California with our high A team, right? Like this is it. This is our team, right? And so it just makes that process a lot easier once you're comfortable with the people around you, which is super easy. Like again, people like Strami and Steve and Billy and the staff that's here are just really easy to get along with, and we're all here. Even over Thanksgiving break, for most days we were in here just like doing stuff, whether it's some of the pro guys, some of the Wake alumni who are in here. So it makes it a lot more seamless to have those things and have these conversations. It's easy enough if a guy comes with a little nick or knack and Strom can just shoot us a text and boom, it's taken care of, or the plan is now in place. There's no waiting for the coordinator or director to get back to us or anything like that. It just makes everything more seamless, and we have all these people who are on the same page with what we want, what's best for our players. So the process is just super easy here.
I wanted to address that quickly. It's not that we're going to stick in the present entirely right now, because I'm also curious. You mentioned coding at one point in one of the prior answers. When did the whole coding thing come about for you?
So that was actually during the COVID year. Bill Murphy, the new Pittsburgh Pirates pitching coach, was our pitching coordinator with the Astros. And it was kind of like, okay, we're all sitting on our butts at home. We're not going to do that. Like we're going to do something. And Murph at the time had personally started diving into SQL because that was kind of the system. That's really the system in most pro orgs that it seems is their database management is in SQL, and then depending on their R&D department or what departments they have, they'll either code in like R or Python are the two like main languages for the baseball world, it seems. So Murph was getting into it a little bit and like, okay, hey, all the pitching coaches, we're gonna learn. So we did a weekly thing where Murph would kind of teach us using the Astros information, and we'd kind of just go through. It'd be like an hour or 2 hours once a week, every week for several months, and I hated it. I I despised it. I was just sitting, it was because to me, it was kind of like when you get a book given to you in school and you hate it, and then you read that book later in life as an adult, and you're like, wow, this book is awesome. Like, this is great. It was like the assignment piece for me was like, gosh, this sucks. I hate doing this. And so we go through the rest of the COVID year, and it's like January of 2021. I had all these conversations about where I wanted to go, what role I was going to be in. We ultimately decided I was going to go down to the DSL. But part of those conversations with Murph was like, hey, man, like, what do you want to do in your career? And that's kind of when the lab was getting a bit more popular. The Wake Forest lab was becoming a little bit more renowned. Pro Ors were starting to pop up a little bit with them. So I told him, I was like, well, I'll probably be a lab coordinator. That sounds like a really cool title to me. And he was like, well, then you might want to learn how to code, jackass. And it was like, oh yeah, that's probably right. Okay, that makes sense. To me, it was like the same thing. The reason I learned or dive into the CSCS and the performance side of things to be able to talk to the performance teams, it's kind of the same thing. Like, you shouldn't have to be running your models for the R&D team, but it's useful if you can kind of speak their language a little bit. So I was like, okay. So when I was down in the DSL, probably like after practice or after a game every single day, I'd sit on my laptop 2, 3, 4 hours and just like do practice, like practice exercises. I went through the Max Marchi book, like how to analyze baseball data with R. Just like spend hours on Google. Just like I didn't really purchase any courses or anything. It was just like using free resources. It's really one of those skills where when people ask me about it, I'm like, anyone can learn. I truly believe anyone can learn. It's the fact that you probably have to sit there for 2 to 3 hours every single day to really get into it and lock into it a bit more. That, like, some people just don't have the time to do that. But for me, it was like I was trying to recreate some of the Astros like system and stuff. Obviously, my coding skills wasn't up to par at that point, but that's when I started diving into like shiny apps and all that stuff. And really a piece of it for me was I knew I would wanted the rehab role. I knew with Chris that we wanted to change some things, but I didn't have like the data management skills really, or then the data visualization skills to go, okay, hey, like not only are we seeing this on the field, how can I actually like manage the data and then visualize it and show people? Because at the end of the day, I can talk all day long, but if I can just show you a visual, clicks so much quicker for the athlete or the coach or whoever I'm trying to talk to. So I think that was a big piece for me. It was like, okay, learning not only this, it's a good skill to be able to again talk with R&D or talk to some of these higher level front office folk in pro orgs, but how can I actually then, like, if I need a quick, simple graphic of something I'm dealing with, now I can just do that myself instead of having to like reach out to someone else or rely on the R&D department for some of those like smaller things.
So you feel one of the biggest benefits of going down that route for you was the communication side of it, or the ability to present. It wasn't just that you could mine through data and find answers, but it was literally you could take information that you discovered or uncovered or that you're working on and present it back to the players that actually need it.
It's both because I think the process of like learning how to code just it's a different problem to solve, right?
Hmm.
And so when you're like working on cleaning data, there's always choices you have to make when you're coding of like how you want to approach it, how you want to clean this certain data set, what gets cleaned, why does it get cleaned, how are you then going to visualize it, right? You need to be mindful of your axes. You need to be mindful of the coloring that you're using. So it's like all these like kind of little minutia that you're dealing with to like make sure that you're trying to present it in like a coherent way. Just that process of like learning that was, I think, really just a really interesting, different way of looking at problem solving in general. And then, yes, it has the added benefit of like being able to speak again, like not super high level on some of those things, but have a general understanding when talking to like someone from an R&D department.
You explaining that answer made me think it's even a little allegorical to player development. Every little thing needs to be given mind because to think that this single thing exists in a vacuum is just like that's so short-sighted. That's not how these things work. If you make an adjustment to the way someone is going to land at foot plant, maybe nothing happens that given day, but that could lead to, I don't know, some hip anatomical thing that they've never dealt with before. And now that needs to be addressed in the weight room. And maybe they're sore. So then you need to talk to medical and figure out a maintenance plan. It's kind of funny to think about because I guess I never thought about coding or data cleaning in that way, that literally every single thing you do does have a trickle down effect somewhere else.
Oh yeah, yeah. And then yeah, I mean, when you get into coding, and then you're scratching your head because there's an error on line 27 of 700 lines of code, and it's because there's a parentheses out of place. It's one of the most like frustrating things ever, but it's almost like a little like reward seeking at times too, because especially early on in coding, if you're struggling with something for a couple hours and you get it, oh man, like the dopamine hit you get from like solving that coding problem is probably comparable to some of like your best moments in life. It's awesome. But another piece too of that was I was then able to like work with some of the like force plate information that we would get from our performance team. So it was also like being able to dive in and not just be able to look at that some of that stuff. Chris Martin was a big helper and like really helping me understand those metrics and really what they meant and how they're like applicable to their KPIs and the weight room side of things. But also then, okay, what do these look like when you actually try and compare them to throwing velocity? Are there correlations? Are we seeing trends that are similar where if a guy is more fatigued based on certain metrics from the force plate jumps, do we see a velocity trend down? You'd be able to dive into some of the shoulder strength scores that we would get from Vol too. So it was a really cool way of like not just having access to the data and having some cool visuals, but really trying to like understand the data on a deeper level and then bring it right into the connection of, okay, here's what we're seeing from their force plate numbers. How is that affecting them, if at all, to like actual pitching velocity and what they're doing on the field?
Kind of related here, kind of a shift. So we'll see how it fits in actual conversation. But a lot of our conversation today has been about your journey on the rehab side of things. And now, of course, your title does include player development. You have worked on the player development side as well. It's not like you're only a rehab guy. So when did you start to see the connection or the bridge that needed to be made between rehab and player development? I think that's a very interesting topic now, and I'm thankful that the industry is starting to see rehab and player development more as a continuum as opposed to two separate roads. But when did you kind of have that awakening or that moment where you saw the connection between the two, where you felt like you could make a difference or get involved?
It was probably those early years with Chris. I don't remember where I first heard this, but it was early on where someone in the SMC world I was reading up on, they said rehab is graded performance. And that really struck with me of like, okay, that makes perfect sense. We're just starting at a different point, and then the timeline is just going to be slightly different based on, what they're dealing with and how it's responding to some of the training. But at the end of the day, that's it. And like not to oversimplify rehab training, but that kind of is all it is at the end of the day, right? Those early stages, it's different. When a guy's 2 weeks post TJ, no, we don't need to be trying to do water bag stuff. We don't need to get ahead of ourselves and really like get out of some of those traditional timelines. But once a player is about to pick up a ball and move it forward, like that, it's player development, right? It's just, again, he's starting from a very slow, early place. And we have a lot of time, depending on where he's at in his career, where we're at in the season. We might have a year and a half to kind of do this and get this guy better, get this guy stronger, and really make sure that the performance side of things is dialed in. But it's performance and development from day one. Now, I think some of that comes from the rehab pitching coach or coordinator role. Seemingly historically in pro ball has been, it's pitching coach who wants to get into pro ball. It's a role that's going to set out cones, have a clicker with them to make sure they're having the appropriate pitch count, and it's going to be very driven by medical, right? That's where these programs have historically come from. That's who kind of set the stage early on with TJ rehab, right? Back then, there wasn't a pitching coach in the 60s or 70s who's going to be like, yeah, I think we should do it this way. And right, it was all new to them. Where that's coming from historically, there's just so much more room to then improve and really connect those silos. I'm never going to be someone like a Dr. Meister who does a surgery. I'm never going to be someone like our PTs who are fantastic at that early stage rehab, but I want to understand those worlds so that once they get to me, once they're able to throw a baseball or throw any implement, which is something we worked very hard on to have their first day of throwing not be a baseball for several reasons. But like once they're there, it's development. We're working on what their throw, what their delivery, what their mechanics are going to look like. Once you're able to then potentially get them into that headspace, it makes it just easier to kind of progress in my mind. Because it's not, yes, it's you're doing a rehab program, but again, you're just starting slower. That's all. We're going to get you back to who you were, or even better, really, is what it should be. It shouldn't be just trying to be the same player. We have all this time. Why aren't we getting better? Like you should, if you have a year to get better in every single department, there's no reason you shouldn't come back a better player. Now things happen. Surgeries aren't 100%. There's all these different things. But at the end of the day, like it's just understanding that workload. I'm not going to start a TJ guy week one on pull downs, right? But at the same time, if that's something that your program does or something that this player wants to get back to, then week one should be prepping him for pull downs down the line. It's not going to look like a pull down, of course, but it's congruent. It's not a different set of things. You're prepping the guy to get back to really high level performance. It should start from day one.
One particular piece you mentioned there that I want to spend a little bit more time on. I'm not sure it's going to be anything super new to this audience, but I still want to hear your take on it. You mentioned we have worked really hard to make those first throwing days happen without a baseball in hand, introducing throwing with another object or implement. So, why is that?
So a couple of reasons. We looked at when they're doing two-hand and one-hand plyos with the medical and performance staff, believe it's slightly different depending on the org or the program, but the last like plyo ball that they use for one-hand plyos is 2 or 4 pounds, again, depending on the program, the practitioner. And so our programming starts with a 1-pound ball. The idea behind that is we're naturally increasing arm speed, right? We're not just having these heavy balls in your two-hand and one-hand plyos and then immediately giving you a baseball. Beyond that, and probably even slightly more important than the weight, is giving them a constraint drill, right? So we'll do some kind of pivot pickoff with an arm position constrained somewhere up top, right? And the reason being for that is we're giving them the heavier ball so their brain doesn't have to associate with baseball, right? The weight is going to potentially produce less stress on their arm, right? In our lab, when our guys do our mound plyos, even our healthy guys, it's generally 60-70% of elbow and shoulder forces compared to when they're throwing a baseball, right? And so we're seeing most likely similar effects with the slightly heavier balls for the rehab guys. And then that constrained position, they're not worrying about where their elbow is in space. Because that's one of the biggest things after any kind of injury, any kind of surgery, you're more likely for your brain to be very concerned about that area, right? How is it moving? How is it responding to different kinds of loads? So the more that we can then take that kind of process and try and have your brain outside of it. So, okay, here's a heavy ball. Here's a constraint drill. Here's a velocity reading that you're going to see every single throw, right? How much can we take you away from here's my elbow, here's a baseball, this is what I'm going to try and do with it, right? We've all seen those first days of throwing with a baseball, and some look fine, some are great, right? But we've seen the ones that I'm mentioning here, and they look a little tough and it's apprehensive. The best compliment I got on this program was the first week of the first group with the Dodgers who did it. It was like week 6, I believe, we got to a baseball with them after a bunch of weighted balls and slowly increasing arm speed, slowly increasing velocity with some of these weighted baseballs. And they were throwing out on one of the backfields one day, had the radars. It was first day with a baseball. Coordinator, director came up and was like, wow, it just looks like they're just having catch. Like it looks like a normal day of recovery catch play. It's like perfect, beautiful. All of that like build up was for that moment to make sure that they're not trying to really be apprehensive or really control where their elbow is in space. So that was a big piece for introducing with the weighted balls, making sure that they have the velocity on every single throw, that they can start to dial that in of understanding their output, their objective output based on their subjective kind of feelings. And then going from there and building that up as opposed to just giving them a baseball day one and kind of using a bit more of an arbitrary velocity range.
Given that you're introducing some of these throwing programs with a heavier implement, has that led you to starting the throwing program any earlier, knowing that you're potentially dealing with lower shoulder and elbow torques?
No, not usually. I would say there was one trainer with the Dodgers who did like to do very typical was like 4 weeks of two hand plyos and 2 to 4 weeks of one hand plyos, and then they would start throwing. And one of the trainers with the Dodgers would let us start throwing on like the second to last week of the one hand plyo. So like a week or two earlier. It's not like a feature of it. It was more just like in conversations with the trainer that like, hey, it makes sense of what you're doing that. It also makes sense that we could potentially start it a week earlier, but it wasn't like the reason for adding that in there.
Right. Yeah, it's not like you've taken a standard TJ, and I hate using standard, but I guess for what we've seen forever of saying like, oh, well, as opposed to starting throwing at 24 weeks because of this, you can now start at 17, or it's nothing like that, correct?
Yeah, no, nothing like that at all. And I actually lean towards I like waiting the extra time. Like Elitrosh's programming with the Dodgers for the early stages was waiting for week 22 of post TJ to start throwing. With the Astros, with their docs, it was like week 16, I believe, was it? I don't have any like numbers or anything to really support this, but it just looked better when we waited those 6 extra weeks. Again, I don't have like a direct comparison of the same players doing both, of course, but they just seemed stronger. You know, the 6 extra weeks of weight training, of just being like comfortable with where their arm is in space, just in a general concept. So no, it wasn't about like trying to rush to get to throwing. And then like extending that out to the back end of the rehab, like it's also not about rushing to get back to the field, right? Like if you're doing a major league rehab and you know the timeline is getting close for the playoffs, okay, that's a different conversation, right? But it was just to give us objective lenses and markers throughout the program. It wasn't to say, hey, he's hit 90, we should go into a game a month early. It's like, hey, he's hit all these markers, he's looking good. It just gives you an extra layer of
Mhm.
objective data to make that decision. None of it was like, okay, this is to push it forward or to make it quicker or anything like that.
The buzzword there that you mentioned was objective data, and I really think that for starting programs, that's one of the things that we're super passionate about on our side with FlexPro Grip is give people that objective data so they actually know when it is okay to start a rehab process. Granted, when you were doing a lot of this, you're going off of standard hand grip dynamometry, which really doesn't correlate to anything from an elbow or forearm health perspective. You can use it for some other stuff, but from a true musculature perspective, or readiness, it's really not showing us a lot. You are getting some shoulder dynamometry, some force plate stuff, but there were still probably a lot of questions early on, which is why waiting that extra 6 weeks, 8 weeks, when you looked at the two programs comparatively, where you probably saw a lot more success because just players were able to get to a place mentally where they felt a lot better. But I'm sure if you can give players that objective feedback early on, kind of like what we have with wearables or different things in the space now, where it's like, no, look, like you are good. You are meeting every single piece. Now, like, what else can we do to make you feel confident? Your body is ready. Now it's just a question of, are you ready mentally?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's where we probably still could do a bit better as an industry there on the front end of having those. But I think that's a big reason for the velocity during it too, right? There's such a world of
100%.
difference where if you're going through a TJ program, Adam, and I sit here and go, "Hey man, congrats, you threw to 90 feet today." Right? Like, cool, that's a marker. It's great. It's a step in the journey. But compare that to going, "Hey Adam, awesome job. You hit 90 miles an hour for the first time." Right? Those are remarkably different conversations, right? And just being able to have that additional mental feedback of like, hey, like not only are these numbers great, you're doing it, you're feeling good, we have everything else helping you with this feedback to just really try and dial in that like you're in a good spot. It's not just like, hey, you did the distance throwing, you checked the boxes, like good job. It really gives you valuable feedback. It's the same thing with we get on the mound very early in the program. They're doing mound plyos week 9 of throwing in my programming, and then 2 weeks later they're getting on the mound with the baseball, right? And one of the best things by doing those plyos off the mound is you're desensitizing them to it, right? We had guys who after several weeks of those kind of lower levels, lower volume throwing on the mound, even early on, we get to the bullpen stage of the programming, right? Where I remember asking one of the Dodgers kids, like, hey, you ready? It was the first one with Trackman back there. And he goes, Ezra, we've been on the mound for 6 weeks already. Like, yeah, who cares? The Trackman's back there. Awesome. Like, great. I'm excited for the data, but like, yeah, we're good. It's another day on the mound. And that's huge, huge, because most kids got hurt on the mound, right? That is the place where they are trying to get back to, trying to kind of shed off some of that crap. Here we go again. The last time I was here wasn't a great outcome. So the more that you can just give them that relief through that feedback loop, through that objective feedback loop, just the smoother the rehab can go, in my mind.
That desensitization process is huge. And I feel like over this last 10-ish minutes of discussion, you really dove into different ways that it can be done. Constraint drills, different implements, whether it is a baseball, plyo ball, javelin, football, softball, anything that literally can be thrown as a different implement, introducing different surfaces, different throwing styles or techniques, all those things will eventually make the final task easier for the athlete when it's time. Yeah, we can do all these different things, but ultimately they need to get back up on the mound. They need to wear their jersey, their belt, their cleats, and get a hitter out. And as you mentioned, that's likely when the injury occurred. At least if we're going to look at percentages, that's probably when it happened. So if we can check the box everywhere else and ensure that that athlete is good in 99% of the scenarios that we've thrown their way so far, and we just have that last 1% of, hey, the lights are on, it's the 6th inning, and you actually need to go get the 2 hitter for this team out, we can take those chances knowing that we have done everything else that's within our control.
Right. And thinking about, we've come a long way. There's still room to grow. You and I can both agree on that. But thinking back to like when the clearance was just like, hey, it's been a year and you're not hurt anymore. Go out there.
Yeah.
You're good for that 6th inning against their 2 hitter with second and third. And it's like, no, I can't imagine a world where like we're okay with that being like the final clearance. And thankfully, I think we're getting a lot better. Yeah, it's just checking all these other boxes just makes it that much better for the athlete, right? It's so much unknown. The more familiar, objective reasoning that we can give this kid as he's going through this process, just the easier it is for him.
Well, we did exactly what I told you would likely happen before we press record. We found a topic and we spent way too long on it. So we do have another couple things I do want to get through.
Yeah.
Granted, we've kind of sprinkled this in along the way, but I of course want to talk about what you're doing now with Wake Forest. You mentioned throwing programs. Of course, you take all those throwing programs that you've worked on forever and have applied them with the guys. You mentioned a little bit of what you're doing in the lab with guys in the mound, looking at arm torques during plyo drills, different throwing drills. I know your role goes well beyond just giving guys throwing programs and looking at arm torques in a lab. So what else does your daily look like?
Yeah, so there's a couple different hats I'd say I wear. The majority is like being the assistant pitching coach, essentially with Eric Neeson. It involves the week to week throwing programs that I kind of put together. It involves like the individual changes that have to be made inevitably on a day to day or week to week basis. With we have 18 pitchers that it's not super clean to just send out a throwing program and be good and I'll see you guys next Sunday. So, kind of work on some of the minutia there. Work pretty heavily on like the player plan side of things with our pitchers too. With Eric, we go through a pretty comprehensive process in the fall with each one of our guys having their own meeting and all that good stuff. Another hat I wear is the lab is a paid product. So actually, people will sign up as young as 12 years old up to professional athletes, and they'll come in, they'll get an assessment from C, from Strami, from Dr. Nicholson. And so part of my job is if I'm able to make it there, I usually will go there, but I'll hop on a Zoom call with them like 2 weeks later and kind of go over all the information with them. So that's been an interesting hat to wear, getting to kind of meet all these different people and see kind of not only their intentions for what they wanted to get out of the lab, but kind of where they're coming from in terms of their background. What do they know about the lab? I mean, there have been folks who know absolutely zero, and it's me explaining what the graph that they're looking at is even saying. And then there have been some people. I mean, there was like a 15-year-old kid that I did an assessment with the other day who was like talking about biomechanical terms, and it was like, oh my God, like you should stop playing already. I want you to be a coach. Come intern for me. It was genuinely impressive. So it's been a really interesting kind of like meeting all the different people and how their interests in the lab line up with getting that assessment done. And then another piece is kind of like helping Chris Lewis, our director of analytics, kind of with his team. And we have I think it's 26 student analysts. Me and Eric, when we first got on board, we gave them a ton of different projects to work on. We have teams who kind of help with the data processing side, super like R&D side of things that I have no idea about, all the way up to people who will be in the lab with us, helping us do the data capture for bullpens or live BPs or whatnot. So that's been a pretty interesting experience, being able to have that team. It's pretty impressive, the work that group does. Pretty awesome to have them around as well. And then just any general like staff requirements, like any weekly staff meetings that we have. We do also, like, the lab is kind of an open facility to our Wake alumni, of course, and then any other local pro guys. We have a couple in right now, so it's a pretty packed day. Usually starts with some of those pro guys in the morning. I'll have a Zoom with one of the lab clients, then our guys will get in. It's more meetings, more plans. And then one of the other pieces that's been fun this at the end of this fall is something called Arm Farm with our position players. So it's a group of about, I think, 8 position players who just, needed a little bit extra attention with some of their throwing. And so we've just taken them through some of the programming, honestly, some of the similar programming that some of our pitchers have done this fall. So it's been interesting to see kind of the position guys progress and deal with some of those training activities that our pitchers go through. But yeah, it's been a lot of different hats. There are things that like pop up, that like some of the recruiting stuff when we have kids on campus, go to meals with them, do player dev plans for them. A single day for me can take on definitely a few different forms.
This arm farm, is it really just introducing kind of the player development principles that we've seen in pitching for so long to position guys that have literally just been given baseballs and told to go long toss?
I think that's a good, like, succinct way of saying it. Billy Salento and Matt Morales, our other assistant coach, they have their hands full in the fall, with fielding, hitting, and throwing. And so it's just a little bit of like, after the fall, hey, Ezra, these guys could use a little bit like extra attention on that side of things. So go do your thing, and can you make their arms a little bit better in the process? Be a nice little bonus. So it's just been kind of explaining some of the things, some of the whys of what we do on the pitching side, and then just running them through. I mean, we had them like doing 250-foot long toss from their knees the other day. It's cool when guys will just kind of like buy into some of the things and just having fun with it, really.
Awesome. And then Probably one more question on this side. We'll see where things go. I say one more. It's never one more. It's always
Yeah.
one more after the one more and one more after that. But what, if any, major differences are you seeing in the college population that you're working with now compared to the pro guys that you had for so long?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, here at Wake, these guys are supremely talented, so that's pretty similar. I'd say my experience in pro ball was, for the most part, on some of the younger side of
Hmm.
things, right? Some of the lower level guys, some of the newly drafted guys. And so I'd say it's fairly similar in some sense. I'd say the older, more experienced pro guys, I mean, they pick things up like that. It's unbelievable. You give them like one cue or one little thing, and it's done. Like that curveball cue, cool. He's throwing that curveball in the live BP. Whereas here, for especially some of our freshmen who are brand new to really any of this stuff, sometimes for some of them, it's like it might take a little bit, right? Here's that curveball. Oh, that wasn't even close. Oh, okay. The next bullpen, there it is. Oh, he gets into a live BP. It wasn't there yet. It just takes a little bit more time for some of these concepts to hit with some of these guys. I'd say is like the major thing. But talent wise, I mean these guys are pretty up there. They still have some of that where they can pick things up, but it's probably that learning curve is the biggest difference between like the older population of pro ball and what we see here at Wake.
I assumed talent level wasn't going to be the answer, given what you guys have at Wake and what it takes to play in the ACC these days. I mean, let's face it, if you can compete as a weekend starter or a back end guy in the ACC, you're probably competing at a low A level or close to it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, wasn't there like an old adage that the SEC was like double A ball? I don't know if
Right.
it's what like double A is a pretty
Jump.
good.
Jump
Double A
is
is very
really
good.
good.
However, yeah, if you're the Friday night guy here at Wake or in an SEC school, like making that jump to double A isn't as big of a jump as it used to be. And I think, it's what we preach here to our guys, our pitchers. The reason we want to come here to Wake Forest and develop for these 3 years is you can skip the minor leagues then, right? Our goal is to have guys after they spend 3 years here and get drafted, hopefully in the first round, right? They're not spending 4 years at the complex level as an 18-year-old. They can just kind of accelerate that process and get the double
Hmm.
A, get the triple A and the big leagues as quick as possible. You don't want to spend time in the minor leagues. There's some fun times, right? And it's a job and you get to experience that life. But at the end of the day, you want to get to the big leagues as fast as possible. We have the talent of guys who can do that. And so if we can just kind of fine tune them over their 3 years here at Wake, that's kind of the goal, is to just kind of speed line that process.
And I think this will be our final shift. I intended this to take a little bit more time, but now seeing how long we've already been in conversation, we'll just see how it goes. The other thing that we're gearing up for, this will serve as a little bit of marketing, hopefully, but we have the Wake Forest Player Development Seminar just a few days away at this point, really. It's crazy to say that'll be December 12th, 13th, and 14th. I don't know if tickets are still available, but I'll let you handle all that stuff. I'd love now for you to kind of just go into what we can expect this year, how things might be different, how things might be the same, and maybe certain things you're looking forward to. I know it's probably hard to pick one, seeing how you help put this together. But with that, I'm just going to push it your way and hope you can take the reins.
Yeah, so tickets are still available. I should say that. We can maybe post a link, or when we post this on social media,
For
we'll put
sure. Yeah.
it somewhere. They are still available. Look, it's really exciting. I went to the first one of these back in 2021 when I was with the Astros, and you can never quite be sure what you're going to get out of an off-season seminar, just because in our industry, right, there, coming from the pro side especially, you can be a little bit of like, okay, what is this person really going to be able to speak about? I think we've put together a pretty good list of speakers, and some people who might be able to buck that a little bit, whether their orgs might like that or not. I think we do have some like dynamite speakers. We have some farm directors from the Cubs, former Astros farm director with Jacob Buffa, now with the Cardinals. We got some different sports involved this year with the New York Knicks. I remember coming here in 2021, and TJ Barra of the Bucks spoke, and that was a super interesting, like, connecting that world. So really, really excited to kind of have that lens in things because that was someone who actually worked in pro baseball and basketball. So being able to kind of connect those two worlds would be really interesting. But I think the speaker list is really fun. We're really excited for the panels. Those are pretty big hits every single year. We've got the college panel. We're excited for those guys. The big league panel, of course, and then introducing this year the S&C panel, which is something like we've talked about here on this call, I'm really passionate about. I think it's really important to make sure those worlds are connected. So we're really pumped to have some of those people on. Steve will be on that. Brandon Golden, who consults for us here at Wake, was a former Dodgers guy too. Nick Shedd, who's the director of S&C performance for the Red Sox, and then Chris Martin, of course, the LSU strength conditioning coach for baseball there. Really great group of guys. Super pumped too that Lance Brosdowski of Marquee Sports Network is going to be emceeing the event. Very thankful for that because I don't think anyone wants to see me try and run a full weekend seminar up on that stage for all 3 days. So really pumped to have Lance. He's bringing on the energy. It's going to be really great having him kind of run that stage for the weekend. But yeah, I mean, I think we have some interesting people. The IHT Performance Group are going to bring some topics that people are going to be pretty intrigued about. There's definitely some concepts or some training tools that are a little bit out there. So hopefully we've kind of transversed the full spectrum of like the baseball world while also hopefully giving like a good amount of like, concepts that people can take home with. And then having you guys with the breakfast on Saturday morning with the player panel, I think is going to be super impactful. We were talking about having a player panel as kind of its own thing early on. So it's really cool to now have it like integrated with the presentation that you guys are able to bring. I'm so excited to have that kind of like new piece this year with that breakfast. Hopefully that could turn into something really cool down the line in the future too. So yeah, I think it's really awesome kind of the different perspectives we'll be able to hear from while also like having information that people can take home. And then the happy hours. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention those. So Friday and Saturday night, we'll go to a couple bars in downtown Winston, shoot the shit. Those are always some of the best moments when you can just kind of be a little bit more casual conversation with some people. And again, the people that we have attending, I think it's 20 plus orgs already have signed up. It's going to be a great time. I'm really excited for people to get down here to Winston. It's also like Christmassy time in downtown, so it's the weather is a little cold. Make sure you have your jacket, but it'll be great. I think it's a really like good weekend to have like baseball centered in Winston-Salem. It'll be a lot of fun.
This is, I think, our fourth year being involved. So me and Gavin, who's a member of our team, attended in 2022, I guess it was, just as attendees. And like you said, the after hours stuff, I mean, that's the sole reason or I guess I don't want to say the sole reason we're at Wake now, but that was our introduction to Wake Forest. We went to Moose's house and I think it was Brandon Golden. Yes, I know it was Brandon Golden. But Brandon Golden had us set up to do a presentation in Moose's kitchen at midnight on the Saturday after presentations and happy hours and all that. And that led to a relationship with Wake. So I mean that's the kind of stuff that happens at these seminar, but especially at the like networking side of these things. You end up making relationships with people that will last. It's not just like a one-time weekend thing. You start to see these people routinely, you connect with them, and the conversations just continue. Something that I'm super excited about this year, you mentioned it, so I feel like I'm just reiterating it now, is all of the panels. I've really liked the development of the panels. Last year, they started to become a little more prevalent with the seminar, but this year to see the strength coaches, college coaches, pro coaches, and then it's part of the reason why we wanted to get involved with the player panel is yes, it's awesome to go so deep on one person's passion project and have them speak in front of everyone. But to me, when we get a dichotomy of answers and takes on one specific subject, that's where people, I feel like, really need to put their feet in the ground and stand strong in what they believe in or be articulate and quick with what they share to get a message out to the audience, knowing that it's going to be countered or supported by someone else that's sitting next to them. And that is just very representative of how I think development exists and conversations exist in our organization as a whole. It's seldom that you see someone given a 45-minute, 1 hour podium talk where everyone has to shut up and listen and not refute a thing. Don't get me wrong. I love every second of that because I love hearing what these people are passionate about. But when you set people up to have a back and forth conversation and they really might not have a pre-existing relationship, but with the common goal of making baseball better or making our industry as a whole better, I get so much value from those. And so I'm very excited for those particular topics.
Yeah, to me, it's almost a blending of the happy hours with the seminar concepts itself, right? And so it just gives you that environment of a little bit more like comfort, and you have the audience questions, you have the panelists kind of playing off of each other, like you said. It just kind of creates that environment for potentially who knows what direction. And Lance has done a good job. They have some prep stuff with with the panels too, of course, but I think that's what's kind of exciting is that they can then take that conversation and play off of each other and go in whatever direction that they could. I would be remiss too if I didn't mention Chris Lewis would hate me for this, but we do have speakers from Japan this year as well, the Next Space company. Really excited about that. That was kind of Chris's little passion project this fall to try and go international. So really excited to have a couple of those speakers as well. Their topic should be pretty interesting. I don't know if I can spell it out quite yet, unfortunately, but for the pitching people in the world, it's going to be something you're going to want to tune into for sure.
I was literally about to say that, so I guess I'm just going to repeat it now. But yeah, I think it's great that you guys are going international this year. It's going to be exciting to see what's going on in development across the world. We are fortunate to work with a few groups overseas in Japan, and just understanding the way that development is treated there versus in the States. Of course, everybody is trying to be the best player they can, but just the different ways that baseball and baseball training is approached has been eye-opening to me. So yes, I guess all that's left to say now is I'm excited for December 12th to get here. I'm really excited to converge on Winston-Salem with the greater contingent of the baseball world. And I think it's going to be even funnier for all the people that are all together in Orlando just a few days before that for winter meetings to then make the trek up to North Carolina together for another incredible weekend of sharing. But Ezra, I want to thank you so much for the time today. I know this was a little funky to work it into the schedule, but I'm glad we were able to. With that, I guess, is there any way people can get in touch with you, follow along, seminar stuff? I know we talked about getting a link up, but I don't know if there's social medias to plug or anything like that before I let you go.
Gosh, I am on Twitter and Instagram. I think my Instagram is like Ezra_Bye, and the Twitter is like EasyBye59 or something. I'm on social media. If you search my name, you'll find my accounts. I don't really post too much, but yeah, the seminar, Wake Forest Player Development, is the name of the Twitter account. I'm selfishly, like, I see all the names of people who sign up, so I'm selfishly like very excited to be able to meet a lot of these people. And I hope Daryl's coming too, but finally like meet you guys in person and, like you said, have the baseball world converge on Winston is really exciting. Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing everyone. I know it's going to be a really awesome weekend, and really appreciate you having me on here, Adam. This is great. It's been awesome working with you guys, and looking forward to your guys' player panel on Saturday, December 3rd.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, this was a wonderful conversation. Looking forward to more. And of course, to everyone out there, we'll see you in Winston-Salem. And thanks for laying back with us.